Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're jumping right into something that's really taken over the headlines. I mean, just dominated. The tragic killing of Charlie Kirk. It's shocking, obviously, but these moments, as awful as they are, they often open these like stark windows into what's really going on deeper down in our society and politics.
Absolutely, and that's what we're aiming for today. We've pulled together a lot of recent analysis, research, news reports. We're not just going to recite the facts you've already heard. We want to dig into the broader implications, really pull out the key insights so you get a fuller picture, beyond just the breaking news flashes.
Okay, so let's start peeling back those layers, the immediate details around the killing itself. The accused killer, Tyler Robinson, he hasn't confessed. That seems significant right off the bat.
Yeah, it does. It tells you this isn't some open and shut case. But interestingly, while Robinson isn't talking, his roommate, Lance Twiggs, is.
Oh.
Quiggs, who shared an apartment with him in St. George, Utah, he's been cooperating fully with the authorities, turned over communications from Robinson.
So Twiggs is cooperating. And then there were these, rumors, whispers about their relationship. What came out about that?
Well, those whispers became official pretty quickly. Utah Governor Spencer Cox, he's a Republican, he publicly confirmed it. He stated that the suspect's roommate was indeed a boyfriend who is transitioning from male to female.
Wow.
Yeah. So that adds this whole new dimension, right? Investigators now have to ask, did Kirk's very public, very strong anti-trans stance play a role here? Governor Cox also mentioned Robinson's worldview seemed shaped by, quote, very dark places of the internet. So you've got ideology potentially mixed into.
That is. Yeah, a lot to process. It makes you think, though, these huge, shocking political events happen, and then they seem to fade so fast from the news cycle. Is this just another awful incident, or is it part of something bigger in the U.S.?
It's a really important question. And when you look at the history, the pattern is frankly disturbing. Political violence is, in a grim way, as American as apple pie. Think about it just recently. Gabrielle Giffords in 2011, Steve Scalise shot in 2017, those two Minnesota state reps just this past June, and now Charlie Kirk.
Right.
And historically, 4 presidents assassinated, 11 members of Congress, 4 governors, dozens of state legislators, mayors.
Yeah.
The list goes on. It's a long, sad history. But here's the thing that worries me and a lot of analysts. It's the normalization. Lincoln's assassination, right? Still taught 160 years later, these modern shootings. They might get a couple of news cycles, if that much, and are then gone with the wind.
Yeah, you see the spike online?
Exactly. Google searches surge that day, then boom, they plummet. Newspaper coverage does the same. It's like the collective reaction is, oh, another one. Awful. Okay, what's next?
Yeah.
That rapid desensitization, that's really worrying. It starts to feel like this is just normal life in America, which is terrible for our civic health.
That's a really sobering thought, the desensitization. Maybe for some it's not indifference. Maybe it's just exhaustion, like the problems feel too huge. On that note, Politico magazine actually gathered, 10 experts on political violence to ask, okay, where do we go from here? What do they say?
Yeah, they've brought together a range of voices, and their insights really map out the current climate, including maybe some of that weariness you mentioned. We can kind of group their thoughts. First, on the problem and its roots. Barbara Walter, she points to 4 conditions where violence often spikes. Democracy weakening, society deeply split along lines like race or religion, leaders tolerating or even hinting at violence, and easy gun access. Her take. The U.S. checks all 4 boxes right now, which is bleak. Then Sean Westwood points out how leaders can exploit the idea that the other side is a vast, murderous faction. It works for short-term gain, but it eats away at stability. Even though, he notes, only like 2% of Americans actually approve of political assassinations. The perception is what gets exploited.
Right.
And Erica France says, look, the Kirk killing isn't in a vacuum. Think January 6 rioters, other incidents. She sees a big problem in the personalization of politics leaders seen as just out for themselves, not representing the people.
Okay, so that's the roots. What about the nature of the violence itself?
Client Raleigh offers a slightly different angle. She sees the U.S. trend more as lone actor violence without a clear partisan trend. Think John Wilkes Booth or Lee Harvey Oswald. Her point is, this suggests maybe we're not on the verge of full-blown civil war, which is something, I guess, but it does mean we absolutely need to look at gun access and mental health support.
And how do we break this cycle? What about leadership?
That's the crucial part. Joel Busher warns that just cracking down hard could actually backfire, lead to more violence. Leaders, he says, have to condemn all violence unequivocally, even if it seems to help their side politically. And they need to acknowledge people are genuinely unhappy with the system.
Acknowledge the anger, but condemn the violence.
Exactly. Saalfeld-Hillison agrees when people feel the system ignores them, violence can start to look justified to some. And look at the scale. Shannon Hiller's group tracked 250 threats against politicians just in the first half of 2025 across 40 states. Her point is, we don't have to accept this. We need cross-party efforts to reject violence, stop the blame game.
250 threats.
Yeah. Dolly Berkowitz adds that glorifying attacks is super dangerous. Risks normalizing them could lead to tit-for-tat violence. She says leaders have to lower the temperature, stop attacking their favorite enemies.
Makes sense.
Robert Pape, who actually predicted back in June we were nearing major political violence, he sees this as a critical moment. He's calling for every leader, president on down, to put out strong video condemnations of political violence, push them hard on social media, especially TikTok, aimed right at their own supporters.
A really direct call to action for leaders.
Absolutely. And finally, Eduardo Moncada echoes the concern about normalization people justifying violence if the system fails them. He says partisan narratives have to stop. Leaders need accountability for dehumanizing language, and we have to correct this false idea that the other side actually wants violence.
Those are some really powerful and honestly pretty disturbing takeaways about the situation here. But Kirk's death, it didn't just stay within U.S. borders, did it? We saw international reactions too. Condemnations from Italy's Meloni, France, the UK's Starmer.
Yes, there were those official condemnations calling it atrocious and so on. But what was really striking was how partisan other international reactions were.
How so?
Well, Hungary's Viktor Orbán, for instance, immediately pointed the finger at the progressive liberal left. You saw vigils for Kirk popping up, organized by far-right groups in places like London, Berlin, Rome.
Right, I heard about the London March.
Yeah, that was huge. Over 100,000 people, led by Tommy Robinson, the far-right activist. It ended in clashes with police, arrests, officers injured, and across Europe, populist parties are seizing on Kirk's murder, pushing anti-immigrant, anti-globalist, anti-elite messages, sometimes using the slogan, "Mega, make Europe great again."
Mega. Wow. So it's like a parallel movement. What's the historical context of this transatlantic link-up?
It's a real paradox, actually. You have the American right and the European right aligning on goals in a way we haven't really seen since the Cold War ended, when anti-communism was the glue. What's weird is that many of these groups now cooperating have traditionally viscerally hated transatlantic cooperation. It's a strange new dynamic.
Fascinating. Okay, let's bring it back home. How did Donald Trump himself react? Especially considering those expert calls for de-escalation we just talked about.
Well, reports say he was in shock, anger, and disbelief. Kirk was seen as a really key ally, a personal friend. Donald Trump Jr. even said Kirk was like another son to his father. Trump acted accordingly, sent J.D. Vance on Air Force Two for the casket, awarded Kirk the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously, planned to attend the funeral.
So, a very personal, strong reaction. But what about his public statements in light of the calls for unity?
That's where the contrast is really stark. On Fox, Ainsley Earhart asked him directly, how can the country come together now? And Trump's response was, well, he said, I'll tell you something that's going to get me in trouble, but I couldn't care less. The radicals on the right oftentimes are radical because they don't want to see crime. They're saying, we don't want these people coming in. We don't want you burning our shopping. So you notice, instead of a unifying message, it pivots back to grievances, kind of justifying the radical right's anger. It wasn't the de-escalation many experts were hoping for.
Yeah, quite a departure from those calls for unity. Okay, the Kirk killing is obviously a huge, tragic event, highlighting these deep tensions. But these political currents, they run deeper than just specific events, right? They're changing how leaders operate, how the system itself works. Let's shift gears a bit. What other big shifts are you seeing?
Well, one really interesting shift, I think, comes from former President Obama. Remember his famous 2004 speech? No red America, no blue America, only the United States of America.
Yeah, iconic.
Well, sources suggest he's basically decided he was wrong. He's reportedly endorsed California Governor Gavin Newsom's strategy to make California even more blue. It's like an acceptance that the kind of unity he envisioned back then is, quote, passé. A pretty significant turnaround from his earlier idealism.
That's striking. And how does that fit with, say, Donald Trump's approach in this divided landscape?
It fits perfectly in a way, because sources make it clear Trump sees himself as the president of the red states of America. He apparently doesn't give a rat's about the blue states, views them almost as internal enemies. And it's not just him. Think back to Steve Bannon in 2016 saying, we didn't win an election to bring the country together. Or even Trump's OMB director, Russell Vought, complaining appropriations are too bipartisan. It feels like a deliberate turning away from trying to bridge divides, almost institutionalizing the separation.
And that separation, that drive for partisan advantage, seems really visible in the fights over gerrymandering, too. Missouri just passed a map targeting Emanuel Cleaver, a Democrat in a D+12 seat.
Yeah, they redrew it specifically to make it almost impossible for him to win, even though the district leans heavily Democratic. Voters might get a say because of an emergency clause, but it's a clear power play. And Ohio looks like it's next. They're expected to go after Democratic reps Marcy Kaptur and Amelia Sykes.
So what's the bigger picture here with gerrymandering?
The big implication is the House becoming more and more like the Electoral College, where whichever party controls the state legislature can basically draw lines to guarantee they get nearly all the House seats in that state, regardless of the statewide popular vote. It's like this huge bug in the Constitution that nobody, not even Madison, really foresaw. And the Supreme Court has mostly stayed out of it, which just lets the political maneuvering run wild.
So, faced with these deep divisions, the gerrymandering, what's the strategy for Democrats? How do they connect with voters who might feel the whole system is broken?
Well, two Democratic strategists, Ashley Etienne and Jesse Lee, they've put out this memo arguing for a pretty direct approach. Campaign hard on the culture of corruption and abuse of power. Their thinking is, people already feel the system is rigged. So validate that feeling and then point fingers, arguing Trump is the one rigging it. They list specific examples they'd use, alleging the DOJ covered up Epstein's crimes, firing officials who disagreed, rigging elections via gerrymandering, using crypto for donor access, weaponizing law enforcement. They argue this worked in 2018 when Democrats picked up 41 seats.
Right, so it's not just complaining, they're proposing fixes too.
Exactly. It's not just diagnosis, it's prescription. They propose a whole package of reforms. Things like banning stock ownership for officials, except broad ETFs, diversified funds, ending gerrymandering for good, real binding ethics rules for everyone with teeth, Senate approval needed for emergency declarations, limited to 30 days, no more acting heads of departments for long periods, repealing presidential emergency powers, making it impeachable to mess with congressionally approved funding, court reforms, especially the Supreme Court, and big campaign finance changes, public matching funds, making super PAC donors transparent. It's a pretty sweeping list aimed at systemic change.
Okay, shifting from political strategy to, well, kitchen table stuff. Health insurance. We're hearing premiums might be about to jump a lot. What's going on there?
Yeah, this could be a big deal for a lot of people, and it definitely has political angles. There are a few key drivers. The biggest one, those enhanced subsidies for health insurance, the ones put in place back in 2021 during the pandemic. They're set to expire December 31st, 2025. If they expire, some people could see premium hikes of 50%, which often means younger, healthier people drop coverage, making the insurance pool riskier and driving costs up even more for everyone else. It's a potential spiral.
Okay, that's huge. What else?
Well, there are also the proposed Trump tariffs on imported drugs, potentially up to 250%. Even if they're not enacted yet, insurers are likely already pricing in that risk because supply chains are global. And you've got the rising cost of new, expensive drugs like the GLP-1s for weight loss and diabetes. That's adding pressure, too.
So politically,
Democrats have a clear line of attack here. They can blame Republicans for letting the subsidies expire and for proposing the tariffs. It could be a really powerful Democratic weapon heading into future elections.
Okay, finally, let's just touch on the human side of all this pressure. We heard about Dr. Yadira Caraveo in Colorado ending her campaign. She was the first Latina to represent the state in Congress.
Yeah, her story is really poignant. It highlights the intense pressure these politicians are under. Sources say she cited mental health issues, including, very sadly, 2 suicide attempts. And she spoke about the stigma associated with mental health. It's just a stark reminder of the human cost behind the political battles.
Absolutely.
And on a related note, though, for different reasons, Representative Mike McCall, a senior Republican from Texas, he's decided not to run again, looking for private sector work instead. It just shows how demanding these jobs are.
We have covered a lot of ground today. A truly deep dive from the shocking killing of Charlie Kirk and what that reveals about political violence.
And the normalization of it.
Right, that normalization. To the shifts in political strategy, the mechanics of things like gerrymandering, and these real-world pressures like health insurance costs.
Yeah, and if you try to connect all those dots, the bigger picture, it's challenging. We're clearly in an environment where democratic norms feel strained, divisions are sharp, both here and globally. And that leaves a really important question for you, the listener, to think about. In this kind of world where division is often exploited, where violence risks becoming normalized, how do we as individuals keep thinking critically? How do we demand accountability from leaders? And how do we resist these forces trying to pull us apart? It's definitely something to mull over as we all try to navigate these really complex times.